Hi, and welcome to this, the second of my talks on meaning and propositions. Last time I introduced words into the model and talked briefly about how logical terms like and or would work. I concluded by pointing to the problem raised by ambiguity. This is the problem that to be able to assign a value to a sentence, it appears that you first must know which of the potentially many meanings of each of the words within the sentence is intended. To be able to evaluate my claim, Steve is a stout fellow, for example, it seems you have to know whether by a stout fellow, I mean that he's put on a bit of weight, that he's a reliable guy, or maybe that he prefers beers the likes of Guinness. And this is baldly inconsistent with the premise of the model that I've been developing. That premise, again, is that sentence valuations are fundamental, and word meanings are derived from them. As I said last time, though, the apparent problem is not so dire. So recall that the model schematized the requirements for sentence valuation by means of the so-called Pvalue function. Spelling out the model was in large part a matter of elucidating the required parameters to this function. For example, it was noticed right out of the gate that whether we value a sentence token, an utterance of the sun is up, for example, will depend on the time of day and where we are. So this led to the inclusion in the value function of parameters for time and position. In due course, a parameter was added for the set of contemporaneously valued token sentences, the agent's beliefs, if you like. The beliefs parameter of the value function introduced the critical distinction between what is actually valuable for a speaker and what she ought to value to maximize her aggregate value. This is a bit abstract, but digressing a moment, my hope is that if you think about it, you can plausibly see this as a representation of the variability of your own confidence in sentences of English, and to start to wonder what more may be needed. The real interest of the value function in the first three videos, so the videos on truth, was that you don't need any specific details about what's abroad in the environment, or for that matter, what's available to perception, if you like, at moments of evaluating sentences to get truth off the ground. And I think that's a pretty big deal. Its interest here, broadly speaking, is that you don't need any such information for meaning either. For example, the model, in saying what it is for the meaning of the name Fido to be a certain dog, need not make reference to the dog himself, the speaker's relation to him, nor for that matter to anything in the nature of a Fido-shaped visual sense impression. So this perennial stumbling block of meaning theories is simply sidestepped in the model. Now, getting back to the topic, the problem of ambiguity is solved in the model, as it is in ordinary talk, by providing context. And in the model, this takes the form of, guess, an additional parameter to the value function. What is needed is just the set of true sentence tokens recently uttered. The model then, with this addition, has come to look like this. And here, this C parameter, this new C parameter, is just that set that I mentioned, recently uttered token sentences. A token sentence, thus, is an assemblage of, as before, a sentence type, which again is a sequence of sounds, a sequence of words, each of which is a sequence of sounds, together with the time and place of utterance, but now also the context when it is uttered. And note that the set B of token sentences contemporaneously believed is not part of the token sentence. It may be noticed that since the elements of C, this context, each are token sentences, each with its own context, we may seem to have got ourselves into an unending regression, but I don't think this really has to be a problem. If needed for practical purposes, we can stipulate a limit to the number of sentences allowed in a context, and we can allow that some sentences need not have context, which would put an end to the spiral. And this will hopefully become clearer in a moment. So what does context give us? Simply this. In ordinary talk, we want to be able to say that an utterance of a sentence like Steve drinks beer could leave us ambivalent, unsure whether to assent or dissent, owing to our uncertainty about whom Steve refers to at the moment. The context parameter of the value function permits this ambivalence in the model, specifically allowing two different contexts, that is, two different sets of recently heard token sentences, C1 and C2. We can have first the valuation C1, say, is 0.9, but then with context 2, C2, the valuation is 0.1. And this, of course, is exactly what we wanted to capture. And we can do this without requiring details of the meanings of the words constituting the sentence S to be known prior to the evaluation. And this is the challenge with which I started. Context gets us a long way, but it can't be the whole story. Clearly, in ordinary talk, we learn a lot about what a word means by who's uttering it. All else being equal, I may come to quite a different conclusion about the reference of Steve if uttered by my friend John, whom I know to be in regular contact with my old friend Steve, than if uttered by my manager at work, who happens also to be the manager of my co-worker Steve, a different Steve. The solution here, of course, is simply to add, as we did the context, the utterer of the sentence to the token, which gives us the value function like this. Here, U is one of the speakers previously discussed. That is, U is one of the agents enumerated in the set of speakers in the model. So a token sentence is now an assemblage like so. It includes the sentence token type, S, the place and time of utterance, X and T, the context, which we just discussed, and now the utterer as well. This helps with the problem of apparently infinite regression I mentioned above, I think. Meeting a colleague at work first thing in the morning, I likely would not need any conversational context to disambiguate the phrases of his first sentence. So, to sum up, I don't see that the problem of ambiguity really requires that knowledge of word meaning be more basic than sentence valuation. Thank you for your time.